All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Utah Business live stream, where we will be discussing how various companies in Utah are managing their remote teams. I'm Elle Griffin, I'm the editor of Utah Business Magazine, and today, in partnership with Walker Edison, we'll be talking with Walker Edison CEO Brad Bonham, Simplus CMO Amy Cook, Chatbooks Chief Product Officer Lauren Treasure, and Weave's VP of Marketing Kortney Osborne. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So much fun. We can't wait.
Having us.
Awesome. So just to get us started, to set the scene, I was hoping you all could tell me where your companies were before all this COVID madness happened and what happened. How did you guys all transition to the remote situation? Who wants to start us off?
I'd like to hear more about what Brad said earlier about switching in 72 hours.
Yeah, that's wild. Let me give you a little bit of background of Walker Edison. So I started this business when I was a senior at the University of Utah. We've always been kind of office-based, right? So everybody comes into the office every day. We kind of meet with our teams. We set out our goals and KPIs. We measure, monitor everything else. We do a lot of fun company activities, charity in the community, all of this together, right? And that's kind of how we built our teams. Obviously, when coronavirus hit, we had to make a decision on how to, keep our teams healthy and safe. And that was by far our number one priority at Walker Edison. And so in about we had kind of been preparing, but in about a 72-hour period, my IT team, Bro is the head of my IT and my network teams. Over about 72 hours, we transitioned several hundred employees from full-time in the office to full-time remote work. So it was pretty wild. We've been remote ever since. And I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of this today, but we've seen a ton of benefits and certainly some challenges as well from going, in person to a remote work environment.
So I'm Amy again. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Simplus. We have always been remote. And so we come at it from the total other end of the spectrum, where there was very little change involved for us. We got some cool virtual backgrounds. I have with me here Bucky the Underdog on video. And we've had to move a lot of our consulting to virtual. So a lot of our clients had to make some changes. But for us, it was a minimal switch because we had always been a remote and distributed workforce.
Kortney, what about you guys?
Yeah, so ours was kind of similar to Brad's story. We were all pretty much in our Lehigh office. We had a few remote employees, engineers in a different city, but pretty much everybody was here. And we kind of saw things and the trends, and I think it was probably about March 13th-ish. And we were planning on doing a test. So we were telling everybody, yes, we told our managers, and then we told the company, we're going to take this Friday off. We're going to test our systems. And on Thursday, we said, oh, by the way, that's actually going to be permanent. So it was a very much a kind of crazy 24, 48 hours. But I was just amazed at how people responded because we really didn't have a lot of issues. We tested a lot of systems on Friday and Monday. But our IT team was incredible. And by Tuesday, things were running pretty smoothly, but it was more of a culture and mental shift at that point. So similar to Brad's, the complete shift. Several people on my team had worked remote previously, but we all had to kind of teach everybody else, okay, this is how this works. So it was a fun shift for sure.
Well, Lauren, Chatbooks had already a satellite office, right? You have a Provo office, a Sugar House office. So what did you guys do?
Yeah, so ours was a little bit different in that we had been experimenting with distributing people in different locations. We had a satellite office in Sugar House and a satellite office in Lehigh, and then our main headquarters is in Provo. So we had people, a majority of the time were in different offices, but still in an office rather than at home. With a few team members distributed across the country that would kind of call in to meetings, but we still kind of had this belief that working together is better than working alone. And so we tried to get people together in offices, despite the fact that we're kind of distributed all across the Wasatch Front. So that was kind of our strategy, and it seemed like it really worked well at the time, but we were in the same boat where we went from having those offices to now 100% remote. And the transition was easier given that we had been using Zoom and, kind of gotten used to a lot of these tools, but it still was, I think, a bit of a hard transition for some team members to just do that overnight.
So I want to start with some of the negative things. What has not been working so far? Then we'll move on to what is.
I can speak to that a little bit. I think I underestimated the value of in-person kind of human touch and human connection. It was probably 2 weeks in, we started getting some messages or phone calls from some of our employees, and specific to those employees that maybe live alone or don't have family close by or things like that, that their mental health was suffering due to just kind of being locked in their apartment or condo or home all day long. And so that was a real eye-opener for us, that, even aside from team building and other things like that, it just for mental health and well-being, it's good to have some of that personal interaction and to get out of your home and to be with other people and to feel some energy around you. And so we've certainly taken a hard look at that, put some things in place to kind of help our employees through, some of those mental health situations. And in fact, we opened up our office to anyone that actually did want to come back. Obviously, masks required, social distancing, everything else. But we had anywhere from 10 to 15 people that chose to actually work from the office so that they could see somebody every day.
It's such a great point that you bring up, because I remember just being in really strict quarantine, for a couple of months. And then I came out and I remember the first time I gave a friend a hug, and I was like, I didn't realize how much I missed actually giving someone a hug. And I'm I am a hugger. So that was kind of a thing for me, but you forget how much there is just being close and feeling the energy of your coworkers and being able to communicate just right face to face.
Amy mentioned energy, and I think the socializing was super the negative, but I think the energy exchange was really hard. And even on this Zoom, I think we're getting used to energy exchange in a digital format, but so much of your communication and your style is in person. And so what are people meaning, and how are they really feeling? And that energy exchange has been more difficult in a digital form as well.
Yeah, and I think that when you wear masks, I had the opportunity yesterday to interview a guy named Roger Love, who is was the vocal coach of Bradley Cooper when he went in and did the Star is Born movie. And so he has this new program out where he's helping people learn how to speak and communicate well through masks. And it was so interesting to hear it. It's relevant to this discussion because he's okay, so what a lot of people mumble, and when you have a mask on, everybody tries not to get their mask off. And so you're kind of going like this. And so he's you have to drop your jaw and you have to talk louder because nobody can hear you. And so giving us all of these tips, and those are some of the things that you don't really recognize until all of a sudden you're forced to wear a mask. You can't see anybody's expression, can't see anybody smiling. And so that's another big challenge, I think.
Yeah.
I think one thing that we realized pretty early on was a challenge was that we couldn't just be business as usual, but on Zoom. We kind of tried to just keep the same meeting schedule and everyone doing everything that they were before, but just now you're doing it from home and on Zoom. And we'd have people kind of feel like they were chained to their desk and getting, Zoom fatigue and feeling kind of overworked and burned out because it's really hard to maintain that same schedule on Zoom, where you're sitting at the same spot in this little square, for for an entire day, it just gets to be exhausting.
Yeah, like, especially if you're like the sales team or whatever, and you're used to like being outside. A couple of our salespeople were like, I have been here from 8 to 5 every day, as they're sitting here in their seats going like this, lower and lower and lower. And you're like, so tell me, how do you really feel about these Zoom meetings? You know?
Yeah. Well, I think that also was a negative in terms of you underestimate how much physical, even though you are like a desk person, you underestimate the physical activity throughout the day, getting up, walking to your friend's desk, walking into the office, walking out of the office. And so something we tried to encourage was taking several walks throughout the day, because you really do underestimate how much you walk around the office. And when you were chained to that desk, as Amy and Lauren explained, like I even was like, my back hurts and my body hurts, and mentally I'm a little bit more fatigued because I was coming in this room and I was not leaving this room. And so that physical aspect too had to be altered to accommodate as well.
Mm-hmm. What about the
It's
logistics
really-
of having kids at the same time, being at home? That one's a challenge, right?
Yeah, we had
took my degree to be a teacher. I didn't. But bless teachers' hearts, because kindergarten is actually very hard to teach. So yeah, it was hard.
Do you guys have young children at home, or are they older? Or
Yeah, my kids are 6, 8, and 12. I actually have them locked upstairs right now. Not locked upstairs, don't get me wrong, but like I have locked myself downstairs. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been really fun to be all together. I've never had a 3-month or 4-month stretch where I have not traveled in 15 years since I've been married to my wife. Not once, except for these last 4 months.
Wow.
And so that's been really special. Educating kids. Wow. Props to teachers. You know, like Kortney said, I mean, it is really kind of awe-inspiring what they're able to accomplish with these kids every day that my wife and I, you know, had to do, really.
Yeah,
I'm very impressed with the kids though. And I've talked to several people about this, that the first couple of weeks were difficult, but then they understood the new routine as well. And they were, you know, there's still every once in a while, they'll come in and tell me something awesome, you know, which is so fun, but they also understood the new routine. And I really applaud all those kids out there that had to switch their whole lives to be like, oh, mom's home. This is odd, you know? So I thought that they did a great job after a few weeks though.
yeah, it is an adjustment for everyone. And actually, like, you know, I don't know whether you call this bad parenting or just flexible parenting, but my kids' schedule has changed so much. Like, we let them stay up until midnight and they don't get up until 11. And by then I've already got 4 hours of work done. And so it just makes it a lot easier for me as a parent to be able to devote like attention in separate segments, because otherwise, like, it would be really hard to try to do both at the same time.
I think the total change of routine is super interesting. And I think that's why, you know, we recently did an article that's about to come out about working from home. And it was really challenging because you can find studies on both sides of the spectrum. Some will be like, working from home shows people are more productive. And then you'll see another study that says, no, all the employees are slacking off. It's not productive at all. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to find consensus. And even doing these meetings, everyone seems very split. You know, some people are struggling with working from home. Some people are not. And I was talking with several business owners recently, and it seems like a lot of the issue is how you're able to hold your team accountable. And a lot of people are doing this in different ways. You know, for us, we live and die by Asana. We have deadlines in there, and I can see all day whether or not my team is checking off their tasks, and I can go look at the tasks. And so it's super easy. But if you don't have that in place, then the manager could have the issue, and a lot of people are struggling with this right now, of not being able to walk into someone's office and say, hey, where is this? It was supposed to be done on Friday. Or, hey, where are you coming along with this project? And without that speaking reminder, how are you guys staying in touch with your teams and knowing what's getting done?
Maybe I could speak to this because we've always been a distributed workforce. And so from the very beginning, we've had to do this virtually. One of the things that I found to be the very most helpful is doing a daily morning scrum. And so what we do is everybody puts their tasks of what they've got to get done for the day in Slack. We review it. We try to start off with either somebody's favorite song or a joke or what someone did over the weekend, and just try to make it as conversational as we can. Get into kind of the tasks for the day, and then everyone breaks and just does their stuff for the day. But when you're accountable to each other by posting what your jobs are in like a group chat, and you get on and discuss different projects going on, and you meet together once a day, I feel like it helps people feel like they're part of a team.
Like that.
I liked what Lauren had said, how you can't work the same way when you had to make that switch. And to your point, like that was a hard thing initially. But one of the things we realized really quickly is we needed to streamline our communications. And my team had to call me out a few times, but there's texting and there's email and there's Slack and there's all these places. We really worked hard to say Slack is where we communicate as a team. And we do work, and we use Asana as well. And so streamlining that so we could hold each other accountable, but then really encouraging people to communicate what you're working on so you're not working in a vacuum. And so we had, in some of our teams, we do a similar Scrum model, but for others, it doesn't make sense. But encouraging people they always felt like, oh, I'm just puffing up my chest by doing this. It's like, no, people want to know what you're working on. So encouraging people to communicate that and encouraging people to give feedback in a streamlined communication fashion has been really helpful, because before you could just walk up to someone and say this. And so those were two things, is just streamlining those communication, encouraging people to really communicate what they were working on helped a lot.
Are you doing that in a public Slack channel where everybody can see, or is it smaller groups?
We call it the Marketing Fam channel, and everybody can communicate in there. We do other things that are really fun as well in that channel, but big priorities are communicated in there, as well as this is something, and I'm rambling, sorry now, but the priorities, before we would do kind of quarterly priorities, we really quickly shifted to a 2 to 4 week priority window, where we always sprinted against a quarterly priority, but everything was changing so quickly. By shortening that window, people knew, okay, this is my next month. This is what I'm doing now. Because we couldn't, as Lauren said, we couldn't work the same way as before. So shortening that and then communicating that in that Slack channel was really helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think we realized early on there was so much going on in the world that we needed to kind of simplify what our teams had to focus on, and not have too many side projects, kind of cut down the quarterly OKRs that we were setting. It was end of March shifting into a new quarter. So it was a perfect opportunity to kind of reassess what we were signing up to do for the quarter and make sure that people weren't signing up for way more than was reasonable, because we were worried about morale. Like, you could see in the first couple of weeks that people seemed to be feeling not great about how the world was going, and also feeling like it was harder to do their jobs. And so we felt like it was really important to make sure that when we were having everyone set their goals for the quarter, that they felt like this is something that I can achieve, so that we could have some wins throughout and not have everyone just kind of demoralized and feeling like everything was so much harder when they were working from home.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying this translate to more meetings or less meetings?
Less. We have, at least. We've tried to have people do things more asynchronously, and that's been a lot more writing your thoughts out, a lot more kind of thinking about it in advance and sharing it, rather than having to be on a meeting for every single discussion, which that's a big shift for us at Chatbooks. Everything was a meeting prior to this.
Yeah, I would echo.
Meetings, and then realized, holy crap, my whole calendar is meetings and everybody's is. And so we learned, right? And we all said, cut the meetings, stop, give yourself work time. So it felt like the natural thing was like, let's just meet about it on Zoom. get it off the calendar. Sorry, Brad, I interrupted you.
No, you're good. You're good. I totally agree. I mean, I think, my day when I wake up, my calendar is scheduled back to back to back to back. So every single one of those calls has to have a purpose. For me as CEO of Walker Edison, I've had to rely on my senior management team more than I ever have before. And I don't think you can expect anybody at any level of the organization to be successful without giving them the tools and the training necessary to do so. And so where everything used to be done in person, now we're very reliant on Microsoft Teams and project management software. And obviously communication is that critical component. Every single morning at 8 a.m., myself, the president of my company, Joanna McKenna, and my partner, Matt Davis, we are on the sales team meeting call. So there's 45 salespeople. We are on that call every single morning at 8 a.m. because that helps us kind of keep the finger on the pulse of what our customers are wanting and expecting from us during these uncertain times. So things have changed for sure. It's you have to have a purpose with everything you do at this point. Can't really waste time on Zoom calls that don't make a lot of sense.
Speaking of that, do you guys do video or audio only? The reason I ask this is because my husband is in private equity. He's the only one on the West Coast. Everyone else is in New York or Alabama. And they can't, he cannot believe that I'm on video all the time. And he's like, Amy, I just took an hour-long meeting over at the golf course yesterday. So what's your problem? And I'm sitting here on video because I can interact with people better. So I want to know what your thoughts are. Do you guys do audio, video, at the golf course, in an office, or your home office? What do you guys find to be the best?
Amy, I have private equity partners, and all of them love the telephone calls as well compared to Zoom. But internally at Walker Edison, we primarily rely on either Microsoft Teams or Zoom video calls. Maybe it's a private equity thing. I don't know.
I think they just want to go golfing. That's what I think.
we're not golfing, so.
That's right.
I had the same conversation with somebody who's in government, and they couldn't believe that we use video so much. And because in the government space, they only use phone, and it's kind of old school. And so we are heavily video as well, but I do think it might be by industry or segment, because some people that's just odd to them for some reason. So yeah, that exchange of energy I mentioned, it's so much. If you just do phone call, it's even harder for me if it's not over video. Totally. So
yeah, we try to do a mix where we're primarily video as well, but we've tried to do things like Kortney had mentioned earlier, getting outside and going on walks. So we'll try to do things like, if it's just a one-on-one, take it on the phone and go on a walk. Or if it's just a quick check-in, maybe do it on the phone or just a Slack audio so that you can kind of walk around the house and not feel stuck in the same room.
I think that's a great idea to kind of vary it up. One of the things that we have been doing at Simplus to try to avoid meeting fatigue or whatever, is to kind of make it fun. So in all of our company meetings, we have things to try to keep the conversation going in a fun way. Yesterday we did a would you rather. So anybody who spoke in the meeting had to ask another team member a would you rather question. And so Isaac Westwood, our COO, asked the question yesterday. And I'll ask you guys, would you rather be a reverse unicorn or a reverse centaur?
Well, I'm not even sure what that is.
Right? Those are very important business questions for people to ask. But we'll do that. And then we have some people who are yoga certified. And one of them did a Simplus wellness yoga session. And we did a Bob Ross paint night where everybody and their families got out and learned how to paint like Bob Ross. And so we try to keep it fun and make it interesting, so it's not just meeting after meeting. But we rely so heavily on video because we feel the same way, that the energy is so different when you're actually looking at people.
I think it really depends on the team, what I'm hearing from you guys, because even in our team, the editorial team is all a bunch of introverts. We're all writers, editors, and photographers and videographers, and we are thriving right now with just being able to sit down, do some research. So we only have one meeting a week And that's our in-person meeting. Our whole team comes into the office on Tuesdays and we do meetings on that day with all the teams. And so we are just like one meeting a week and then we're good. And then the sales team, they have meetings every day and they're in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because they need the in-person and to bounce the ideas off each other. So I think it really is. Are you seeing that anyways play out at your companies as well? Just depends on who's on your team and what you want.
Yeah, so in product and dev, we're a lot of introverts as well. Whereas our marketing team, I would say, is primarily extroverts. So I think it's also trying to understand like who is doing really well and who's not. I think there was a meme that was going around the internet, like all of your introvert friends are doing fine, but your extrovert friends are not, and you should check on them. And so we've tried to like kind of meet in the middle and make sure that people can do happy hours or activities or kind of things that they normally would get out of being in the office, and not just feel that every single introvert is doing fine, because they kind of are actually. We're not all introverts.
The world has shifted in our favor. Before this, the extroverts were really thriving and the introverts were like, oh.
Yeah. I noticed though, like I always say I'm an outgoing introvert, so I feel the same way. Like people would assume I'm an extrovert, but I'm actually like, it takes a lot of energy for me. We did a survey with our team and what they prefer, and when we got back what they do. And I think the overwhelming majority was saying, as long as we're all doing the same thing. I think that was the thing, and the key with teams is if we're all together, great, and we're all working the same way. If we're all working from home, that's great. But I think I was very worried as a marketing team. Collaboration is so huge. Mm-hmm. And I was very worried going into this that we would lose productivity, but all of us shifting together allowed us to actually increase productivity. So I think that's just something is, as you're looking at your team, just make sure it's consistent and it's not one person doing this and one person doing that. And I think you can maintain or increase productivity as a result.
No, I think that's such a great point, Kortney, because I had a colleague call me up. He reports to me and he totally called me out the other day. He's like, I feel like I have a different standard than other people. And I was like, well, no, because he thought that I was expecting different things from him working with his children, like at home, than I was expecting from other colleagues. And I had not communicated the fact that I'd had like the standard was exactly the same, right? And I had communicated, I had individual conversations about like, my expectation is when you're on with a client, try not to have your kids come in, but when it's an internal meeting, have your kids sit on your lap, have them join the meeting, and so he felt like I was giving him a different standard. And I hadn't communicated that I had already talked to everyone individually about it. And I know that everyone has different standards, but that was ours. And so I think number one, I felt at least good that he could tell me that without feeling any kind of like repercussion, like I was going to come down on him or anything. And then I also felt like I was a horrible communicator for not making sure that it was communicated widely that everyone had the same standard. And number three, I felt like it was super interesting how the consistency and the same standard that everybody else had was so important to everyone. Even though we have to cater to different personalities, even though we have different types of roles, you see it a lot even in sales versus delivery, right? Some people feel like the sales team's having way more fun because they're getting bonus more and they're, have all these perks and President's Club, and the delivery team's like, dude, what gives? I'm just like, I'm the one doing all the work, right? Not that that's really what's happening, but sometimes that perception is there. And so I think that maintaining that consistency and helping them feel like everything's fair is super important. That's a very long answer of saying, Kortney, ditto.
I agree.
All right. So then what do you think is going to continue going on from here on out? Is this working for you? I know, Kortney, you said as long as everybody's all in it together, but what does that mean going forward?
I want to answer this one first, because first, I think my survey said people wanted a hybrid approach. they didn't want to go back to always in the office, but they also didn't want to go back to only in home. And so we will probably do a hybrid approach moving forward where we have 2 or 3 days in the office together and 2 or 3 office, and the meeting days are in the office and the collaboration and then the work days are other place. But moving forward, the reason I wanted to answer this first is I'm so excited because I think this is normalized work from home, especially as a working mother, and my husband also works as well. You remember that BBC, like the BBC Dad?
Oh, it's my favorite. It's my favorite video.
Yeah. And it went viral, and it was this kid that came into the meeting, and it was this I've been wanting to write an article about this. We're all now BBC Dad. And it's completely normal. And I love that because I've been encouraging so many women to keep working and love your careers, but it's hard. It's hard as a father, as a mother. And so you say, what's the future? What's it going to look like? I think this is normalized and shown that people can be very productive at home. And I'm excited for that future. I'm excited for the guilt and shame to go away when it comes to this stuff. So for my team personally, we'll do a hybrid approach most likely, but I'm just excited on the bigger scale for this to have started a bigger conversation.
Mm-hmm. I love what you just said there. I feel like it is hard sometimes when you have children, and sometimes in Utah especially, there's that big question of should I stay home or should I work? And it's not really an either or anymore. And I think that this is going to make it a lot easier for especially women to be able to have both and to thrive with both. And I love that BBC video because the kid came in just super confident. I remember how he walked in just like this, and then the little kid in the walker also walked in the door. And I thought that was just so amazing because it showed that no matter what age you are, no matter what where you live in the world, this has really become a factor where it's providing increased accessibility to people. It's providing more jobs. It's making us more of a global community than ever before.
We were actually in the middle of building out our new 130,000 square foot corporate office when this whole thing hit. So I do think that there's going to be space for both work from home and work in person. I think whatever makes the most sense. I love some of kind of the outlying factors of not having to commute. You're not, emitting pollution. We're a more green company. We can hire different types of people because they're now able to stay home with their kids. I think it opens our business up to a wide range of people and possibilities, much more diverse than maybe we've had in the past because we've required, work from the office. So I do think though that there's going to be, at least in our business, probably an omni approach, to the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. We've actually decided to close both of our satellite offices, and when we do go back, we'll certainly do some type of hybrid approach because I agree with what Kortney said earlier. You kind of have to be in it together. And we learned when we were doing this before that if only one person or even 2 people are on video and the rest of the people are in the office, it doesn't work well for a meeting. Because there's a conversation happening in the office and the 2 people called in are just kind of outsiders. And it's been so much easier if everyone's on video for it to feel like everyone collaborates on the same level and has their voice heard in the same way.
I like what a couple of you have said about how it evens the playing field for people with kids or any kind of extenuating life circumstance. If you're getting treatments because you have health issues, if you're whatever you have going on, it kind of allows space for that. Even my sister's on maternity leave right now, and she was taking a year-long maternity leave, and now she's thinking about only doing a 4-month-long maternity leave because she's like, oh, well, if I can work from home, then I don't have to go in a closet and pump, at work. I can just actually feed my baby because I'm there. And I thought, well, that seems like a huge benefit to the business if they can retain you as a worker because you get to feed your kid. I mean, it seems like something very simple, but that makes a difference into who those jobs are available to and whether or not they're willing to work them. Have you seen that?
Totally. It reminds me of yesterday. I love this girl on my team. She's got little kids, one that's very young, and she showed up in 3 different shirts at 3 different meetings. So she showed up in one at the beginning of the day, and then she showed up in the middle of the day. It's like this beautiful blue. And I'm like, oh, Jillian, I love your blue shirt. She goes, well, that's because my baby like projectile vomited all over my shirt just now. And so I had to change it. And then later in the day, I'm like, will you change your shirt again? And she's like, yes, these are my pajamas. And so it's in some ways it's amazing. And then in other ways, I'm like, well, is there a public and a private life anymore? I don't know. That's a whole other can of worms, but you sure look good.
Totally.
I think that I think it's going to open up for us. We haven't seen it yet, but we are having talks about it, especially in our support worlds and other worlds. Just like, JetBlue really pioneered this like work from home, part-time, and it didn't really take off a lot of other places, but I think that there might be some opportunities to take a similar model that others have taken in certain areas of the business. And for me as well, the talent, Brad kind of alluded to this, of having a wider talent pool will also change for us, and being able to bring different people and different perspectives in will be really, really awesome.
Yeah, I would add, hiring over the last 5, maybe even more years here in Utah has been extraordinarily competitive. We've put out, offers at what we thought was, a very competitive or even above market wage, and had very few people apply, relatively speaking. And so I think this is an opportunity really for employers to not just hire the best locally, which is important to us. We love our local grown talent, but when that's not possible, we're just hiring the best, right? Like that's our new baseline, is we hire the best. It doesn't matter where they are, even in the world, really. So I really do think there are opportunities here as kind of we continue to work from home.
I'm very interested in the hiring conversation. I think we're early on enough that maybe a lot of us don't know where that's going to go yet. But if we do open up talent pools to a nationwide audience or even a worldwide audience, how that will change how we staff our companies. And not only that, maybe there's the option to potentially solve some issues. For example, in rural communities where a big plant has gotten shut down and those people don't have jobs because that was the only job in the town, could they all now get remote jobs and work from a rural town in Utah and still have earn a good living and all of that? Or even with the diversity discussions that are happening right now and companies struggling to be able to hire different kinds of people. Well, if you're in Utah and can hire somebody from Harlem, or if you're anywhere in the world, you could hire anybody, even if the job is not accessible to that person via bus or car or train. I think that opens up a lot of possibilities and opens up our job pool. I'm really curious to see where that's going to go.
I feel so strongly about this because it is so possible to give many, many people opportunities, but there's also that technological divide that if we do not upskill our people, we're going to have a really big divide between those who are able to reskill and those who are not. And there have been a lot of studies that have been involved on when we're offshoring jobs and we need our people to be able to reskill, do they have the aptitude and do they have the interest? And so that is a really important discussion because, some people are really good technologically and some people are not. And it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. It just has to do with skill set. So I do think that when we talk about diversity and we talk about equality, we have to keep that really in mind. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, you guys.
To add to that, Amy, I know that the state of Utah has had a lot of initiatives around training, but also infrastructure in rural Utah. Some parts of Utah don't have high-speed internet, and so it's kind of like, how do I expect someone to stay engaged with us on Zoom calls if they don't even have access to high-speed internet, And so I think it's important for us to look at those opportunities to support local initiatives public-private partnerships are extremely important at a governmental level. And so as we continue to expand both training and infrastructure into those communities that are lesser served, it just opens up additional opportunities for us as employers to, continue to add to our amazing people on our teams.
Yeah, agree. But it also brings up an interesting conundrum with like BYOD, like bring your own device versus what the company is going to pay for. And if you've got like a bring your own device policy, are you going to require VMware and all this compliance stuff? If you're like SOC compliant, like you have to. And so you're going to have a lot of really interesting conversations on compliance, security, and who is responsible for the tools that people are using at home.
Yeah, no doubt.
Responsible. That's a great question. Who is responsible? In the office environment, the employer does provide the laptops, the Wi-Fi, all of that information. So in an at-home environment, who should provide that? Should that be the company? Should that be the individual?
I think you do limit who you're able to hire if you require certain levels of hardware. There are some people that simply can't afford a $3,000 setup, right? And so at Walker Edison, we've taken upon ourselves to just outfit everybody with everything. Now we have learned lessons through that, going from, if you're on my business intelligence team and you have 3 big 24-inch monitors surrounding your desk, and I give you a 17-inch laptop to go home and work from, we continue to learn these lessons where you need a similar, the similar tools that you had when you were successful in the office as you do at home. So we've kind of shouldered that expense ourselves, but mostly so that our employees didn't have to.
Yeah, and I think companies should, if it's to do the job that you are being asked to do, I think the company should provide the tools that you need to provide. One thing in this work from home change was chairs. Like this went longer than expected, and so our CPO Angie, she was awesome, and they had like a drive-through chair pickup, like come in, get an office chair, go on. We have them, but things like that. Just ask your employees what they need to be successful, and if it's within the realms that you would expect, I think companies should provide that. They would expect to provide it when they're in the office. I think it should be expected outside of the office.
Which it's so interesting you bring that up, because I had an employee ask me about a week ago if they could take the office desk and move it into their home office. And that was like a new level I'd never heard before. And I was like, I don't think so.
We sent ours home. Yeah, we told people to take desks home and chairs home.
That's what I should have said. I should have said, go ahead and take it. What I should have said.
It's sitting there empty.
We sell desks for a living, so we actually just, any of our employees that wanted any furniture from us, we just gave it to them. We said, hey, let's make your workplace at home as comfortable, if not more comfortable, than your workplace at work. So we actually saw, it was in some office categories, we saw a 10,000% increase when coronavirus hit, because so many people started to work from home that they needed those office desks, they needed those chairs, they needed those bookshelves. Like I saw a bookshelf very similar to the one Lauren has behind her. And many people didn't think about that until they were forced to work from home.
Yeah. So Jason, if you're listening, my bad. I will totally give you a desk.
We found we had to kind of encourage it though, because I think people hadn't really accepted that this could be long-term. And so they were just making do at the kitchen table, or, a folding card table or something like that. And so part of it was we wanted to encourage people to do it so that they could kind of mentally prepare that this could be your future for a while.
That's right. Yeah. How long do you guys think this is going to last?
How long do I think coronavirus is going to last?
Like all of our, like, do you have a crystal ball?
No, you got to think, as soon as there's a vaccine, they're talking about producing, hundreds of millions of doses, like over just a couple of months, right? Towards the end of the year. That was the articles I was reading yesterday. However, I do think that all of us have kind of learned, a lot of best practices around work from home that will certainly continue after coronavirus is solved.
Yeah, I think
if it's going to sustain for a period of time, at least if the working from home aspect is going to sustain for any period of time, I imagine there will start to be constraints around, okay, but who pays for the Wi-Fi at my house? And what if I don't have a good office space in my house and I'm in a tiny, 300 square foot loft? Who's going to help me have an office space? So how I imagine there will be some conversation around what the company provides versus what the individual is bringing. And maybe that'll change real estate, how people are getting offices for their houses or things like that. And I have seen some companies will just give their employees a stipend, like here it's $500 a month. You can use it for furniture, Wi-Fi, your phone, whatever you need, like that you pick out what you want. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on what you think companies should do.
So I can give you some general trends in terms of so I mentioned my husband's in private equity, but he does real estate specifically, and nobody's, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but there's a big concern around office use and office building space right now. A lot of it's being converted to mixed use space. There's also a move, like a deurbanization movement, where people can get more in the suburbs and they can work from home and they want to be able to have a larger place. And so I think we are, just like you said, all going to have a lot of very interesting work-life trends that are going to be permanent.
And my thoughts on this is just, and I don't want to get in trouble with my finance team, but I do think the whole world is here, this is a computer in your hand. And I do think that the shift will eventually need to be made that, we'll make these secure, but I do think that companies should start giving a stipend for cell phone use in some way, shape, or fashion, and making that consistent, because most of the time they're not using their office number. They're using their cell phone to do the projects. And so I don't think it's maybe right now, but that's something just high level that I do think that companies actually could save money if they just gave a stipend for cell phone use instead of giving out physical phones all the time to their employees. So
That's interesting.
Any other thoughts on that?
Lauren is either frozen or she's shocked by that last comment.
Lost her. Oh no.
No, I think you're totally right, Kortney. I think it's something that is really, this is kind of going back to the democratization globally. This is a few $100s instead of several $1,000s, and being that really opens up the playing field for additional people as well. So I think you're absolutely right. And it's a pretty exciting time to be part of business as well.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit job dependent. What we didn't want to have happen was someone's personal cell phone is associated with business relationships, and then that person leaves, and suddenly it's like, hey, who do these clients call? And so we wanted to control that a little bit more from a business perspective to make sure that those employees of ours that needed a company issued cell phone, we'll give them a cell phone so that, that relationship is maintained with.
So you make sure that they have a separate company number.
That depending on the job. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, because, and then just from a marketing side, Kortney, aren't you dealing with well, should we call their cell phone numbers? Should we try to get should we even bother calling landlines anymore? Should we, those are just conversations that we're having on the marketing side.
Yeah, we're having those as well. And one of, this is not to be a plug for my company, but that's one of the things with our doctors is that they actually have a mobile Weave app. They can communicate through their cell phone, but it looks like their business number. And so having technology like that, for small business owners or large business owners, because you're right, I don't want people to have my cell phone number, but I communicate with my cell phone number. And so having some technology around that, because it's in the palm of my hand and people can contact me. So yeah, it is, we've got to figure out where that line is though, Amy, to kind of your question of how much do we want to blend these lines of home and office?
I know, I have to say I'm already starting to get annoyed that people are calling my cell phone, because people are just getting my number now because that's how I've been calling people. And so now I've been starting to get calls from And I'm in the press, so PR people call me all the time, like, "Hey, you want to feature this person?" So
And you're like,
call
I
me
thought
like
you were my friend for dinner plans.
I know. Like,
Yeah.
I talked to you for a specific story a week ago. Don't call me at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday.
That's absolutely right. It's funny too, because like we talk a little bit more about globalization. Simplus was recently acquired by Infosys and they're based in India. And so we have our 550 person team, and my boss, Ryan, our CEO, reports to his boss in India. And so all of a sudden our work-life balance has really shifted. Like I had somebody call me at 11 o'clock at the other day. Hey, Amy, is this too late for you? And I'm like, as I'm like waking up, I'm like, not at all. How can I help you? And I'm like lying in bed, like ready to go to sleep. And so it really does. And I have to say, like, a huge plug for Infosys. They are so flexible. You can get them anytime, any day. But I do think that in the United States, especially, we do still preserve, like we do still value private time and public time. And that blending is one thing that we're seeing. And I think it's creating a lot of stress. Back to kind of what's negative, I think it's creating a lot of stress on our employees because they can never get away, and they don't want to feel like they have to say, hey, I just really need some time with my family right now. They don't want to have to tell their bosses that, but they need it. And so I think we need some training, corporate training on, and it may be by company and what the expectations are. Like at our company and in my team, I say, like, we track by hours, and I say, hey, if you've got your 40 hours a week done, I don't want you working more than that. And I don't care what time of the day you do it. I don't care when it's done. And I can be flexible like that because we're marketing, we're project based. Other departments can't be like that. But I think you have to set those expectations out very clearly and be able to define the line for them and say, this is when I need you, and this is when you need to take your personal time. And it's really up to you on how you want to structure your life. So giving them more accountability.
Cultural, Amy, and I think it's also, as leaders, it's an example. Like, you could say that until you're blue in the face, but if you're emailing at 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday, people feel like they have to respond to you. And so I think it's both setting that expectation, giving people the space to set routines and to set boundaries and hold them to that, but at the same time be an example. Yesterday I had a colleague of mine who's on vacation, and he texted me, hey, thanks for that response on that email. And my initial thing was, okay, let's talk about that subject. And I took a breath and I said, stop checking your darn emails. Said it doesn't work. And so I think top down, we need to set an example of, like, you need space. I'm going to respect that space. But at the same time, I'm going to set the example here and say, I also take space. I'm not going to respond to you at midnight. I'm not going to send you a text after, 7 o'clock at night. So giving the culture, but then being an example of that culture so people believe you because you're setting the path.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. And I think a communication is probably really key there, because for me, because I have to work with India, and because I have to work with different schedules, and because I employ a lot of women who like to work at night because they're taking care of their kids in the day, what is acceptable for one person might not be acceptable for another. So being very aware of that, I think is a great point, Kortney.
I think
we've seen that with
vacations.
We've seen that with vacation as well. I don't know if you've seen this, but nobody's taking it since this all happened. Part of it is that you can't really travel, but people aren't taking time off. And so we had the same thing with culture, is we need to tell people they need to take vacation, even if it's, they're not going somewhere, they're staying home. You need to take time off, and people just weren't doing it. And we kind of realized, well, it was because we weren't doing it on the executive team, we weren't modeling that. So we're telling people to do something that even we weren't doing. So I completely agree with your point, Kortney, that you need to model it and make people know that it's okay.
And sorry, I am talking way too much, so I won't say anything after this, but also force it. So today, I gave the whole team the day off. because again, sometimes when they're even off, they're on, and you feel like you have to constantly be on in this environment. Give everybody the day off together. Have a summer Friday. If you can do that, I know that that's a privilege that I can do that for my team, but they're not taking the vacation. You're not taking the vacation, so you don't have the example. So force the day off. Force the day off where they know nobody else is going to be on, or a half day or 4 hours or something like, and there's other ways than just giving everybody the day off. But Lauren, they're not taking vacation. I'm not taking vacation, so I realize that, and we're forcing it today and saying, I don't want you to get burned out. You need boundaries. We're going to take today off as a team.
I really love what you say about, like, I think the overarching message is that you value their free time and you value them as people, and you know that they're not just there to work. I think that's a great comment.
We've just really seen, I think, Slack statuses have been really important, because if you can see that my notifications are turned off at a certain hour, then you're not going to Slack me after that hour. Or if you can see on my Slack right now that I'm on a live stream, we'll be back at 11, then you know how to interact with people. And my team will do that a lot, on a walk for an hour back at this time, or running to the doctor, or you can kind of just see what's on just by where everybody's notification or Slack called status update is. And I like that a lot.
I've never used it that way. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Plus you can have a little emoji by it. It just shows what you're doing. Okay, before we go, what is your last ride or die app or program or software that has been saving you during this time?
Netflix.
Okay, fair enough.
I was going to say Figma. I was going to say that we're so lucky that we have all of this software that can allow us to keep doing things and keep operating almost as normal. But there's so many great tools now for collaboration. Like we use Figma on the UX and product side, where all of our designs are there, and it's collaborative, and you don't have to share Photoshop files, send them via email or Dropbox or whatever. I just think anything that is kind of real time and collaborative that allows people to see what you're working on and not have to send it directly is right now a lifesaver.
Yeah, we primarily use Microsoft Teams is kind of our, but again, to Lauren's point, anything that allows somebody to work remotely from anywhere that has internet access, like we have people that have gone home to the Midwest and they've been there for 4 months with their family, and they are cranking and they're doing a killer job for us every day because everything's cloud-based, everything, we've given them those communication tools to succeed.
Yeah.
Kortney?
Mine is Slack. And it's I was not good at it before, and it was something I was like a texter, so I had to switch my behavior there. But Slack, and then this isn't a mechanism, but gratitude, I think, is also the mechanism that has saved us, is taking a different mental shift to show gratitude to each other, and then be grateful, because we were kind of getting in our own heads there for a while. So as a team, we just tried to start showing more gratitude. So it's not a technology, but it's something that saved me for sure.
Such a good reminder. And for me, besides Netflix, I think that Zoom has been the virtual business, the platform that we rely on.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here with me today to talk about this subject. I think that was very helpful to all of us businesses out here that are also trying to make it work. So thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
It was so much fun. It was nice to meet everyone.
Yeah, you too. All right, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us.